This is the De Stijl movement, and these are the big ideas. So while Piet Mondrian was in Holland, he founded the De Stijl movement with Theo van Doesburg, and they shared ideas about art as an expression of the relationship between art and life. They believed that the evolution of art should follow the progression of humankind, so they wanted the movement to captivate the entire human experience. And Van Doesburg founded the journal De Stijl to promote these ideas and demonstrate that their geometric abstraction, based on their theory of spiritual and pictorial progress, could form a total environment and impact modern life. And the movement was all about the combination of modern art and living. What is the De Stijl movement? So De Stijl can be directly translated from Dutch to English as the style, and it is mostly horizontal and vertical lines. And the reason for this is because a line can be expressed mathematically as a motion defined by the interaction of a vertical and horizontal force, and there are mostly primary colors used, so red, yellow, blue, black, and white. And the reason these are considered primary colors in De Stijl art is because they're seen as the building blocks or spiritual components that in different forms can be used to make everything in the universe. So, for example, red and yellow in different proportions can create every shade of orange. And again, let's take that example of red and yellow making orange with red and blue making violet. You can't mix orange and violet to get a color. So these are what makes the colors primary, and De Stijl was most commonly seen in easel paintings, but also found in architecture and designed objects such as furniture and clothing. Mondrian is most commonly associated with it, but he wanted it to be applicable to all people and things. Mondrian attributed the elements of the movement to theosophy, which is an occult philosophy that sought knowledge of higher spiritual thoughts and truths rather than those available to science. So, understanding the difference between Mondrian and Van Doesburg is very important to understanding the movement. And Mondrian used primary colors with rectangular shapes and lines to create balance and harmony, while Van Doesburg was more experimental with colors and often incorporated diagonals and more dynamic compositions. Mondrian also used strict geometric arrangements and horizontal and vertical lines intersecting at right angles to create a grid structure, while Van Doesburg works were more dynamic and asymmetrical, experimenting with diagonals for movement. And lastly, Mondrian mostly worked in oil paint, but also worked with drawings and collages, while Van Doesburg worked in paintings, architecture, designs, and poetry. So this was a piece that Mondrian created called Composition with Red, Blue, and Yellow. And there's not much about it that I read, but basically there's a small canvas with colors red, blue, yellow, and black, and there's squares and rectangles defined by their horizontal and vertical lines. And De Stijl is also called neoplasticism, which refers to plastic arts such as painting. And for centuries, European painters attempted to render 3D forms in believable spaces, while Mondrian wanted to focus instead on the properties of paint and its ability to abstractly express ideas using line and color. Abstraction is the truest form of reality. That's what he meant by that. And Mondrian was inspired by Cubism, which explored multiple perspectives. He wanted to push beyond the strategy of fragmenting forms and move to abstraction. He eventually fully develops his style using abstract arrangements, concluding that asymmetrical arrangements of geometric shapes with primary colors best show universal forces. And some historians view this painting as his interest in dialectical relationships, so composing with opposites such as black and white or vertical and horizontal lines suggests evolutionary development. And so he wanted this painting to sort of be a harmonious painting of contrasts, if that makes sense. So you can see the lines, there's differing thicknesses, and all the shapes are different colors and different sizes, but yet they all work together. The De Stijl movement arguably changed European art forever, as its impact can still even be seen today. And it challenged the European artistic tradition of creating 3D works in believable spaces by focusing on the medium itself. So usually paint, and how it can work to abstract ideas using simple forms such as lines, which we see a lot. Ideas are expressed, how the world works is expressed using lines and colors, the foundation of the world. So this is a piece by Theo van Doesburg, and it is not required, and there's not much actually known about it, but these are a few things that I noticed. So the shapes are not all squares and rectangles, and the colors are not that bold. They're more experimental than Mondrian's, and you can actually depict a human figure here, even though it is still very abstract. And there are diagonal lines instead of Mondrian's straight lines. And the colors just are not as bold. While still sort of sticking with the primary, we can see yellow and black, but they're not as bright as Mondrian's. And this is the attribution activity. I hope you guys get it right. This is another movement, and it's called Dada. And before I get started and talk about sort of what it is, I just wanted to say that the bolded names are very important, and you should definitely write those down as I go. But if you don't get to all of them, that's okay. You really only need to have Duchamp because he has a required piece. But anyway, Dada emerged as a response to World War I, and it was very experimental and new, sort of avant-garde, and it was founded by Hugo Ball in Zurich, Switzerland in 1916. In America, Marcel Duchamp and Francis Picabia were associated with the Dada idea of anti-art, and Marcel Duchamp used the term ready-made to describe his object art. Picabia was influenced by Duchamp and the mechanization in America, and he began to depict machines. And to spread Dada, the Zurich group made a Dada magazine and had art exhibitions spreading Dada's ideals. Dada spread to Berlin, where collages were the typical Dada piece that was created. And an important artist is Hannah Hoke, who made very disturbing pieces and sort of focused on Germany's situations from a woman's perspective. So these pieces were focused on political commentary, gender issues, and questions of modernity. So this is a piece by Duchamp, and it is called Fountain, and it was originally made in 1917, but remade in 1964 because the original is unfortunately gone now. But Duchamp went to the Mott Pumling Supply and bought this urinal, and he turned the urinal on its side and signed it R. Mutt and then the year, which was 1917. And he submitted it to an art exhibition that he was a founding member of, which was called the American Society for Independent Artists, and they were sort of known to accept every piece that was submitted to them, and they rejected this one. Which is pretty interesting. And a lot of people describe this as shiny, curvy, and porcelain, but it's really important to remember that it's just a urinal, which to Duchamp would be considered one of his ready-made pieces. And he's making us see the urinal in a new way, and this was made for us to ask questions about art, such as what art exactly is and what the artist does. This piece was meant to challenge ideas that were already created about art. They were meant to challenge our ideas about what art was. So the Dada movement challenges all styles of art that come before it. And this style challenges the idea of what people believe art to be, who can create it, and what its purpose is. Because in past movements, most of the pieces have a specific purpose or meaning. And what we're seeing in Dada now, especially in Fountain, the piece that we just looked at, is the purpose is just to show that sometimes art has no purpose. And art can really be whatever someone wants it to be. This piece is not required, but it is a collage that demonstrates the Dada movement in Germany, and it's called Cut with the Kitchen Knife, Dada Through the Last Weimar Beer Belly Cultural Epic in Germany. So it is a very long name. And this was a photo montage from 1919, and just a little bit of background about what was going on in Germany in 1919. So there was political chaos. The government changed after World War I, and there were different groups clashing with one another, and that's exactly what's captured in this collage. She's cutting sort of a swath and piecing things back together, focusing on the fragmentation. And all these photos came from newspapers and magazines, so they're all very relevant at the time this piece was created. And the central image is German artist Kathy Kalowitz with dancer Nidhi Impekovin, and the artist Hannah Hoke. Her head is in the corner of a map that depicts countries in Europe with women's voting rights. And this piece was actually broken up into quadrants. So in the upper right quadrant, we have the anti-Dada. The lower right is the world of Dada. And then top left is Dada propaganda. And then on the bottom left is the Dada persuasion. And this is the attribution.